What we did earlier was we looked at the Civil Code of Law. Can somebody give me just a simple sentence on what is the Civil Code of Law for? What's it about? Okay, what about the camping trip? I say it so much that it sounds like that's the truth, when it's actually bigger than just rules for a camping trip. It is that. Let me say it this way, because this should frame something. When God set out to say this is the basis of what cultural civil society is about, it's about these things. In other words, why is civil law relevant to you when you're not going on a camping trip? Why would it be relevant to you? Why are we spending so much time to make sure that you understand the principles behind laws of civility?
It teaches us about God and His character.
It does. It also gives you the fundamental basis or foundation of what a cultural society that thrives is. In other words, God on civility. This is what civil behavior should be, and this is uncivil behavior. There's a reason I'm underscoring it, and you won't find out for about 3 hours why, but I am. My point is that when people distance their culture from God and the foundational truths that are found in, let's say, the Ten Commandment principles, they are uncivil according to God. They may see themselves as humanists that are great humanist societies, and God calls them foolish and uncivil. What we're doing is building an uncivil climate. Watch, because as we distance ourselves from the things of the Civil Code of Law, we will become a brutish society that kills this person, but says this person is sacred, even though that what they're doing seems to be morally reprehensible. You're going to find that wrong is going to be right, right is going to be wrong, and things are going to be reversed in your society. And you're going to walk around going, well, wait a minute, that's not right. And somebody's going to go, that's not right. Of course you can kill the unborn, but don't you dare smoke in my presence. That's immoral. And the morality will become this cobbled thing, and you'll be going, wait a minute. But let me conversely say, even Christians don't seem to know what civil behavior is. Our behaviors are patterned by how God revealed what His nature is. Our behaviors are fundamentally not patterned by whether or not Hollywood says it's popular or good. That's not where we get our rules. And I understand the impact of it. Can I just say that in the past, I've said a number of things about your generation. This isn't about your generation. This is about mine jumping ship on truth. You're the inheritors of it. We're the ones who did it. We're the ones who are the professors that are walking it out the door and dismissing it. The removal of the Ten Commandments from a lawn is only a graphic image of what's already been going on during this generation as we've removed them from our hearts. We have said we can fulfill a foundational society in civility. Now here's the problem. Many of you were absolutely invested in the idea that tolerance wasn't simply that all people are valuable, but that all ideas are valid. All ideas are not valid. 1 + 1 = 46 is an invalid idea. Okay? It's a wrong idea. But when moral relativism, in the guise of pluralism, takes over a weakened society, there's no moral standing left. What I'm trying to do is rebuild in this classroom what God says the foundation blocks are of civil society. Okay? So would you take your Bible and go to Numbers 26 for a minute? Now, where does the Civil Code of Law pick up in Numbers? It's 5, 6, 15, and then what? 28 through 30. So I'm going to do a run-up to 28 to 30 is what I'm doing. But in order to do that, I want you to see that there's a principle in the background of what happens as he gives the last part of the law. I'm not including in the law, for instance, Numbers 27, which is a case study. It's not technically black letter law, it's a case study. So let me show you how problems develop and a case study develops, and then let's take us back into law. And by the time we get to 30, you're going to find that there's going to be a direct conflict between Civil Code of Law and modern American culture. A direct conflict that's going to be very powerful, and some of you are going to really wrestle because you feel more aligned to America than to the Bible. It's going to happen. Okay? Let's take a walk through it. In Numbers 26, this is an easy passage because there's a huge portion of it that's nothing more than numbers, counting. Okay? So this is going to be a quick one. But in Numbers 26, 1 all the way to 63, this is a big, long story that has to do with getting counted. And here's the thing. Numbers 26 and 27 contains a vital leadership lesson that Moses learns. Those of you who would lead, you're going to need this lesson. It's disguised as a lot of detail, but it's actually not that complicated. What I want you to see is that there's a problem for people in leadership to remember, especially when they forget the rules were made for people. So in the process of the law, God inserts a story that says, yes, yes, there are rules, but the rules were made for people. So there's a softer side. Can I just add, there's a softer side to God and civility that comes out in this lesson. Now, I'm thinking of the Pharisees that were offended by the hungry disciples eating from the stalks as they went by the barley grain and ate it on the Pharisee. And you know, one of the things that happens is they get all, in their face of, how could you do this? God says you can't eat. And Jesus said, wait a minute. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. There is a balancing piece of God that says, when I made rules, I knew who I was making them for. I'm not just up here breathing garlic on high, Now, let's do a quick overview. There's 3 events that led to some outcomes that start in 26. In 26, 1 to 51, next to it I would put counting the people in a census. It's very simple. Numbers is about, in the first chapter, counting in a census. And in the 26th chapter, late in the journey, they do another count. This is a head count. That's what it is. 26, 1 to 51. Then in 26, 52 to 56, there's casting lots for the apportionment of territory. This is what they're doing. They begin to cast lots. They're not in the land yet, but they start dividing up the land in an agreement so that when they get into the land, they will already have the land divided. So in 26, 52 to 56, if you look at it very closely, it says that they divided for an inheritance according to the number of names. So in 1 to 51, they were doing a head count. Then they were applying the head count to the size and land apportionment in 52 to 56. All of which I just said should have been absolutely boring and no one in this room should care about. You should be sitting here going, ho-hum, I don't care. These people are dead. Their borders are long since gone. Why do I care about this? You care about the first 2 stories only because of the third. The third story is that they count the Levite population that was given to the land in 57 and 60 to 62. And when they do that, they count up first they divide up the property, 52 to 56, and then they divide up the Levites given to the land in 57 to 62. And the story's not about the events at all. It's really not. It's about the inequity that came from the events that Moses never saw coming. I want you to put yourself in a situation where you're the leader and you made rules, but you had no idea the rules were going to hurt a certain group of people. You didn't know it was going to happen. It wasn't that you created the rule to hurt anyone. It's that you were applying the rules and all of a sudden people got hurt. What people got hurt? Well, let's go back and take apart the events. Event number 1 in 1 to 51, do you see, if you go through it, 4 to 11, you can write next to it Reuben. 4 to 11, Reuben. And the total on Reuben's number is what? It's found in verse 7, 43,730, sons of Reuben. And he gives you the people in their different names. But bottom line is that's the sons of Reuben, 43,750. Again, using the Elohim and not knowing what those numbers actually make equivalent to our number system today. But nevertheless, it's the number we're given. Then in verses 12 through 14, Shimon or Simeon. And if you don't want to write out Simeon, just circle in verse 12 Simeon. And then, where do you see the number? It's in verse 14, 22,200. Okay? The third one, in 15 to 18, you see Gad in 15. And about verse 18, you see 40,500. The fourth one you see is the sons of Judah, and you see that in 19, sons of Judah. And if you go down to verse 22, you'll see 76,500. So the Judahites are a larger number. Then the sons of Issachar, you can get that in 23. And those will number 64,300 in verse 25. Zebulun in verse 26 will number in verse 27 60,500. Manasseh in verse 29, or actually 28 or 29, doesn't really make any difference, through verse 34, the sons of Manasseh will be 52,600, or 52,700. Ephraim comes up next in 35 to 37, and you get down to 37, and I see 32,500. Then in 38, circle Benjamin, and I see Benjamin in verse 41, 45,600. I get down to Dan in verse 42, and he's in verse 43, 64,400. And then I have Asher in verse 44, and he will be down in verse 47, 53,400. And then I have the sons of Naphtali in verse 48, and I get down to the Naphtali number of 45,400. And verse 51 says, put a box around it, those who were numbered of the sons of Israel, 601,730. That's a little less than started the journey. Meaning, at the beginning of Numbers, they come up with over 602,550. Now they have 601,730. Why? People got swallowed up in the desert, died in rebellion, and they had a variety of numbers of problems, okay? All that to say, on the basis of that, these are the numbers of the men who could fight. That's what you should put next to there. This is the army size. This is not the size of the entire population, it's the size of people who can fight. The head count meant that all but 1,820 of the 603,550 counted in Numbers 1. You can write next to it Numbers 1, 45, and 46. Almost all of them were replaced. What he's showing you is a story. An entire generation of people was replaced in the desert. That's what he's trying to tell you. He's trying to tell you that Moses is looking around at the end of Numbers, and he doesn't see anybody he started the journey with. He sees kids who look like their dad used to look when they started the journey. Does that make sense? In other words, there's a feeling behind these numbers. When you read them, you would read this in Sunday school, and it'd be like, wah, 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 603,000, wah, wah, wah. Who cares? What this is Moses is looking around, and everybody looks familiar, but nobody's the same. Everybody's the son of somebody he knew, the grandson of somebody he knew. All the big strong men that are standing there ready to fight in the army are the kids. Moses is standing there, and he looks like he's 150 years old in front of 20-year-olds. And he's looking around. Now, as we come to the end of the book, we have to recall that there are 3 stages of Israel's journey through the wilderness that you have to remember. Do you remember in Numbers 1 through 10, 1 to 10, where were they in the first 10 chapters of the book? Does anybody remember? 1:1 to 10:10? Numbers begins where? It begins at Mount Sinai. They were at the mountain. So for 10 chapters of Numbers, that's a big portion of the book. A third of the book is just them getting themselves organized to leave Mount Sinai and begin the walk. Okay? The second box from 10 to 22 is a 38-and-a-half-year journey And this is at Sinai and beginning walk. This is 38 and a half years, and it is the walk itself. By the way, the first 10 chapters, 19 days long. The next 10 chapters, 38 and a half years long. Do you see? When you're reading the book, you don't get the feeling for the weight of the journey. 19 chapters is just 10 chapters is just 19 days of the journey. Then you break into this long stretch that's summarized between chapter 10, verse 11 and 22:1. And the last part of the book is 21 to 36, the middle of 21:2 to 36, the end. And that last part are a few final months as they're camping at Moab. This is near Nebo, and this is in Moab. This is Sinai. So in a way, Sinai to Moab is the journey. But this is only a few months. So when you look at Numbers, really, the bulk of Numbers, a third of it has to do with 40 years. The first part and the last part are just little time. Have you ever watched a show and they try to play out, well, for instance, if you ever watch 24, they spend, 30 weeks getting you through 24 hours, okay? It's painful to watch every hour. And each hour you need to remember that they just only lived an hour. You've been living a week since you saw the last installment, right? And so you're going, man. Now here's the problem. In shows like 24, people can't be pregnant because they can't film it over a 6-month period and keep the person looking the same. They can't do it. And so people in those shows have to be brutally hard on their bodies to stay exactly the same. You got to cut your hair the same way for the entire year because they're filming 24 hours, but it's taken them a year to film it. My point is, when you look at this book, notice that what's happening now when we get to this part of the book is we're in the last little bit at Moab, and they're about to enter. None of this should be that interesting yet, okay? I'm not trying to be interesting. I'm just trying to give you the background. You should be sitting here going, okay, I get it. Where's this going? It's going somewhere, okay? Now, the second event of the book, I told you, was chapter 26, second event was 52 to 56. Immediately after tallying the potential warriors, God commanded Moses to divvy up the land geographically with the larger portions going to the larger tribes. So, when God set up the land in 26:52 to 56, he did it according to the inheritance divided by the larger and smaller groups. How did the tribes get where they were? You're going to have somebody ask, well, why did they put the tribes where they put them? It had to do with the number of children they had, the size of the army that they had. So the larger armies got better or bigger territories with more resources. Why? If you put 10,000 people in a spot that can only support 100, they're not going to make it. But what you do is you put the places with the heaviest resources, you put the heaviest population. This isn't hard stuff. I'm softballing it here. Now, get down to the third event. Then in verses 57 to 62, there's a counting of the Levites. And the counting of the Levites they were numbered according to their families. And notice that the Levites are the Gershonites, and the Kohathites, and the Merarites. And I'm getting that from verse 57. Those are your three names that carry through. And then the rest of them are the sons of Levi. In other words, in 57, there are specific families. The larger group is all sons of Levi. Okay? Now, don't forget that Moses was tied to this family. Moses and Aaron's sons were of the same family. So, as a result of the pedigree of Moses, his family would be landless. Why is that important to the story? They're divvying up land that they're about to go in and get. Moses isn't going to get any. We forget. This prince of Egypt, he doesn't get any territory. Why? Because he belongs to a Levitical family. So when God made the rules and Moses spoke them, there was no personal benefit to Moses through the rule. Why was that important? I think it added credibility to the rule, don't you? It's not like, and then they gave the greatest territory to Moses and his family. No, he didn't even get any. So here's the lawgiver, and he gets nothing. Truthfully, none of these three events appears to be relevant to a believer. But I want you to see that the entire, all the way down through verse 62, I want you to make a note at 26:62. That the three events aren't there for the events. They're there for what they caused. The entire story was only to set up what follows it. Do you remember reading in Genesis 5 that very strange genealogy that wasn't really a genealogy but a prophecy? Do you remember that? And it set up Genesis 6? Well, 26 sets up 27. That's what's going on here. Now, there are three results close up I want you to see at the end of chapter 26. 26, verse 64, all the way from 27:23. 26:64 to 27:23. If you hang in there, I promise you'll get it, okay? First, 26:64 and 65, what's the first result of what happened? God lifted Moses with a reminder that he keeps his promises. I see it in 64 and 65. What is the promise that God gave and reminded Moses of? They will die in the wilderness, but there is a coming generation that will. In other words, the background was, Moses, the people you're doing this with are not going to be the people that get the results. Their children will be those that get the results. I want you to know that that was quoted by our patriots in the generation that put together our Declaration of Independence. What they said was, we will probably die penniless, but our children will be the inheritors of what we've done. Great societies are not based on people who consume the resources and ignore their children. They're based on people who look toward their children and ignore their own needs for it. You have to remember that we are standing on the back of a generation that went halfway around the world to subdue an axis of evil, and they did it at great cost to themselves so that their children would have freedom. Great societies aren't built on self-consumers. These verses are about, it's wrong to make all of our decisions based on 2- and 4-year voting cycles on whether or not, are you better off than you were 4 years ago today. Ronald Reagan said it, and it was a powerful line, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? It was very powerful because people weren't. But here's the problem, it's also myopic. It doesn't take into account who comes after us. Is it possible that we would have to make a decision in this generation that would badly curtail this generation's prosperity in order to help the next generation's prosperity? Yes. And are people willing to do it? No. And that's why these verses are there. God's promise was, yes, they're going to go through the hard time, but their children will get a kingdom because of it. Now, the second thing is that there was an exposure, and I want you to see a blind spot. This is a blind spot that was uncovered in the inequity of the inheritance that was proposed. And this will help the ladies in the room, okay? Because later on you're going to be mad at me, so this is going to give you a positive. You're going to feel good about me for a minute, okay? 27 verses 1 to 11 is a story that popped up that no one expected. There were some people that were taken advantage of in the laws of 26. The only reason 26 is there is to explain to you the inequity of 27. There were some ladies who got bypassed on inheritance, and they didn't, and it wasn't fair. The law left them out in the cold. Can I tell you that I've read it very carefully many times? I really don't believe Moses saw it coming. Some problems come into our lives not because somebody's being evil or disobedient to God, it's because there's a blind spot. Have you ever pulled your car into a lane, but there was somebody else there, but they were in your blind spot? And they beep and you pull back over, and how do you feel? You feel really stupid, right? I mean, you feel like, you know, this morning, I got to tell you, I was on the treadmill and I was watching a news broadcast, and I was on the treadmill, and after 20 minutes it goes to a cool down, okay? So it automatically brings, I'm doing an uphill climb as fast as I'm able to do, and I'm watching my heart rate. And so I'm 20 minutes into this thing, and I'm just like this, and I'm going like this, and I got 150 heart rate, and I'm doing this uphill climb, and it's all going on for me. And then the thing just goes to cool down, and then it slows down, right? Well, now I'm thinking, I got to do another routine. But I forgot to hit the off on the button when I turned around to get off the treadmill. Because I'd been on it for so long, it felt like it was normal, you know? So I'm walking. It's not like I flopped onto the floor. I was walking and everything, but I just started to get off the thing as I'm realizing it's still going. So, of course, I get toward the end, and it throws me off. And I'm trying not to, you know, look like I just went flying off the end, and there's a woman behind me giggling. And so I went and I cleaned it, and then I hit the off switch and got back on. But the point is that it's not, a lot of mistakes don't come because you're trying to be evil. You just don't see it coming. You don't realize where you're at or what you're doing. That happened. Now somebody read out loud the first 11 verses of chapter 27, because this is a law called the law of inheritance, but it actually comes from a dispute.
Then the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Ephraim, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the family of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, came near. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the leaders and all the congregation at the door of the tent of meeting, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, yet he among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but he died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be withdrawn from among his family because he has no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. So Moses brought their case before the Lord. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, The daughters of Zelophehad are right in their statements. You shall surely give them a hereditary possession among their father's brothers, and you shall transfer the inheritance of their father to them. Further, you shall speak to the sons of Israel, saying, If a man dies and has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughter. If he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. If he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. If his father has no brothers, you shall give his inheritance to his nearest relative in his own family, and he shall possess it, and it shall be a statutory ordinance to the sons of Israel, just as the Lord commanded Moses.
Okay, what happened essentially was, in verse 1, do you notice how careful they are to tell you who these women are in terms of their heritage? It doesn't just give you the name of their father, it gives you several generations of the family. Why is that there? Because under the law, we want to be sure that we know exactly who we're talking about. These women were unrepresented in the assembly. Why were they unrepresented in the assembly?
Because they didn't get married and they didn't have brothers.
They didn't get married. Their father died in the wilderness, but not as a result of being involved in any particular rebellion. He just died. And when it says he died in his own sin, what he means is he died not as a part of any uprising. He just died. It was just the natural thing that happened. So, as a result, when all of the men were counted and the inheritance was divided up by the men that were counted, and there were no men there representing these girls. In other words, they were overlooked. It was a misunderstanding that came from them being overlooked. I would write next to this Acts chapter 6, because you're going to find out that in the beginning of the church, what happened was a group of Greek-speaking widows were not getting their money and their food allotment that Hebrew-speaking widows were getting in Acts chapter 6 because it was an oversight, and as a result, they got the deacons from this. Okay? The point of the story is that you don't have to mean to do wrong to do wrong. You can set out to do right, but just misunderstand what's going on. I have a story that I like to read. This is from David Roper in The Law That Sets You Free. It's a great illustration of a blind spot. He says, a close friend of mine has a friend who is a young attorney. He's a member of a sizable law firm run by a rather traditional boss who enjoys a special kind of ritual at Thanksgiving time every year. Each year, the young attorney participates in this ritual because it means so much to his employer. On the large walnut table in the boardroom of the office sits a row of turkeys, one for each member of the firm. It isn't just a matter of if you want to have one, you can take it, and if you don't, you can leave it. The members go through and there's some protocol involved. Each man stands back and looks at his turkey, and when the time comes, he steps forward and he makes an announcement of how grateful he is for his Thanksgiving turkey again this year. The young attorney was single, lives alone, and had no use for a big, huge turkey. He had no idea how to fix a turkey. Even if he could prepare it, he had nobody to eat all that meat. Because it was expected of him, he took the turkey every year. One year, his close friends at the law office replaced his turkey with one made of paper mache. They weighed it with lead to make it feel like a real turkey, but it was a bogus bird through and through. On the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, everyone gathered in the boardroom. When it came his turn, this young man stepped up, picked up the large bird, and announced his gratitude for his job and for the turkey. Later that afternoon, he got on the bus heading home. With the turkey in his lap, he wondered what in the world he was going to do with it. A little further down the bus line, a rather run-down, discouraged-looking man got on. The only available seat was next to our young attorney friend. The lawyer learned that the stranger had spent the whole day job hunting with no luck, that he had a large family and was wondering what he would do for Thanksgiving tomorrow. The attorney was struck with a wonderful and brilliant idea. This is my turn to make a good turn for this man. I can give him my turkey. Then he thought, this man's no freeloader. He's no bum. He asked the man, how much money do you have? He says, oh, a couple dollars and a few cents, the man replied. Well, I'd like to sell you this turkey, he said, and he placed it on his lap. Sold. The man handed over $2 and some coins that he had. He was moved to tears, thrilled to death that his family would have a turkey for Thanksgiving. He got off the bus and waved goodbye to the attorney. God bless you. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I will never forget you. The bus pulled away from the curb as both men smiled. The next day, the attorney went to work. His friends were dying to know about the turkey. You cannot imagine their chagrin when they heard the story of what happened. I understand through my friend they all got busy every day that week looking in vain for a man who, as far as I know, to this day still entertains a misunderstanding about a guy who innocently sold him a fake bird for a couple of bucks and a few cents. I like that because sometimes we can hurt people and we don't even know that we are. And we can do it with words that are insensitive, or we can do it with some kind of short-sighted, ill-informed idea that we really haven't thought through. It is easy to hurt somebody and not know you're doing it until you did it. Has anybody had the experience where you said something and you had no idea why the other person was hurt, but they were absolutely devastated by what you said? Did anybody do this? Good. So there's like at least 3 of us, 4 of us. Good. Because it makes me feel better when other people, misery loves company. Okay. Here's what I want you to see. What God said to Moses was that they needed to be compensated. Heretofore in the law, women were not given an equal standing in property rights. Here, they were given an equal standing in property rights if there was no male heir. What would that do, ladies, for you? This is more than it appears. This is like a Supreme Court judgment. You have to understand, Supreme Court judgments aren't only about what they're about. They're a principle of law that gets used in every court of the land. What just happened in this text for women?
For survival without a man.
Yeah, you are no longer required to have a man to survive in the economy. However, there are already laws to provide a covering for you. But should you find yourself without one, not through your own misdeeds, there is a way that God can say, no, you can own. Now, the problem is, there's still a blind spot here. And the blind spot is, though she can get an inheritance, she can't transfer property without a male heir. In other words, God pushed on the whole idea of get yourself a man. I'm not trying to be uncomfortable about this. What I'm saying is, in their economy, there was no way to protect a group of girls in a tent. There was no way to do it. You're out in the wilderness. There's bad things are going to happen if you don't get somebody on your side. And so God quickly, and by the way, when they spread out in the land and they have farmhouses and your farm is, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, what do you think is going to happen when it's just a group of young ladies who don't have anyone to guard them? Am I telling you that you can't learn to shoot? Yes, but they didn't have rifles. And I'm going to tell you that when it comes to brute physical force, The world can tell you there's equality all they want. Put two teams, two equal teams of a group of men and a group of ladies of the same age, and I'm telling you who I'm betting on. When it comes to brute force, now, when it comes to intelligence, I also know who I'm betting on, the girls. But that's beside the point. Look, you got the intelligence, but you didn't get the muscle. Let's just be honest. And though the world doesn't want to see it, look, I'm the guy who worked for Mobil Oil, who got sent out there to break up parking lots with a 35-pound jackhammer all summer long with two girls. They sat on their hard hats and helmets because they couldn't hold a 35-pound jackhammer all day long. I did the work. They watched me and talked to me. This is how it really worked. We all got 18 bucks an hour. And so if I have a little bit of this, by the way, it was a best paying job I think I ever had, but I've been getting less and less every year since. The point is that we all got put out there for labor because America is all stuck on this equality even when they can't do it. Okay? And the problem is if you've actually been out there, it's just not right. The way we do equality is we say in the past, this group of people was handled inequitably, so in the future what we're going to do is handle this group inequitably to make it up for it. Two wrongs make a right. And you're going to find that you're going to be sitting in a job and you're going to know more about the job and have worked longer and done more, but someone else whose ancestors were inequitably treated will get the job in front of you, though they don't know how to do it. And that's what we call equality today. It's take it out on me because my ancestors did to your ancestors what? Mine were in Germany. They didn't do anything. Okay? Well, we did blow up the world, but that's beside the point. The whole point that I'm making here is that this inequity was addressed under law, but it still left a gap. And the gap that it left was she can't transfer property without a male heir. Now, all of that was just background to get you to 15 to 23. 27, 15 to 23 is an intimate story. We're going to come back to this story when we prepare you for Joshua, but I want you to see what's going on. By now, Moses is very old. Joshua, the young 80-year-old, is going to take over. And Moses spoke to the Lord in verse 15, "May the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation." This is Moses speaking to God. God, may you appoint a person here in the flesh who will lead them. In other words, God, I'm getting too old. I can't do this anymore. And I'm asking you to appoint a successor. Moses did not cling to leadership. He did not cling to life. He got the idea that at a certain point he wasn't effective anymore. Then verse 17, I want this man who will go out and come in before them and who will lead them out and bring them in so that the congregation of the Lord will not be like sheep having no shepherd. Here's what Moses said. I can't even get out in front of them and walk, and you can't lead from behind. That's what he's saying. I really want somebody who's going to be an example to them, and I can barely get up without my walker. It's not really intimidating to come out to the Amalekites, putting your teeth in and bringing your walker out. Attack! That just doesn't intimidate it. I need some more than this. And then he goes on and he says, so the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. So he said, I want you to go out and do with a priest as a civilian authority and a priestly authority. I want you to do what you do to the animal, laying your hand on them. I want you to transfer the authority and do it in front of the people. Verse 20, you shall put some of your authority on him in order that all the congregation of the sons of Israel may obey him. Moreover, he will stand before Eleazar the priest, who will inquire for him by the judgment of the Urim. Remember, that's one of the stones in the ephod that you cast before the Lord, at his command, and they shall go out at his command, and when they shall come in, both he and the sons of Israel with him, even all the congregation. Moses did just as the Lord commanded him, and he took Joshua and sent him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation. He laid his hands on him and commissioned him just as the Lord had spoken through Moses. What I want you to see is that Moses has a successful successor strategy while he's alive. And he passes to him authority while Moses is still there. Did you notice God said, give him some of your authority, not all of it? So Moses was now the sort of the emeritus leader as they overlooked the promised land. We're not there yet. Now, I did all of that to get us back to the Civil Code of Law. And the Civil Code of Law that's found in 28, 29, and 30 includes two very important features. There's going to be a whole story of offerings, which is the calendar, and then there's a story of vows. The calendar story will be important for the rest of the Hebrew Scriptures. You're not going to understand what it's like when we went over burnt offering, ole offering, mincha. You don't know what the rest of the Bible's about if you don't know what those offerings are, because they just insert it and expect you to know. So the rest of the Bible, all the way into the New Testament, they expect you to know what the holidays are. If you don't know the holiday calendar, you're not going to understand them. You can't really address American history if you don't know what Christmas and Easter are. If you don't know what 4th of July is. Yes, it's the day after the 3rd of July, but it's something more than that. So here you're going to get the calendar. We're going to take a break, come back, take a look at the calendar, and then roll this into a conflict of our culture when it has to do with women.